So today we are going to start with ratios and proportions. So first we have to do some defining of all of these terms and kind of what they mean for us in geometry. So a ratio is a comparison of two or more quantities. Basically all you're doing is looking at two numbers and comparing them. What this means is that there are a couple of different ways to represent them. What you're used to seeing would be A to B, written like this, with the dots in between. But you can also write it as A to B. Even though it looks like a fraction, it's not A over B in this case, because it is a ratio, it is A to B. And then the other way to write it would be just to write it out, A to B. And one of the biggest things to remember when we're working with ratios is to remember that they can be simplified. Simplified. So going into ratios, our example is a music store has 40 trumpets, 39 clarinets, 24 violins, 51 flutes, and 16 trombones. Give the simplified ratios. So in order to do that, I've got to figure out what numbers correspond with what. So in this case, trumpets, there were 40 of them, and there were 24 violins. So I've written my ratio right here, but it wants the simplified ratio, and this is not simplified. So in order to simplify it, I am going to put it in the form that looks kind of like a fraction, and I'm going to throw that in my calculator. After you do that, it should give you 5 to 3. So the ratio of trumpets to violins would be 5 to 3. So if I were to do this with flutes, there are 51 flutes and 39 clarinets. If I put this in the fraction form and then simplified it, I would get a ratio of 17 to 13. And you'll notice I wrote it in the other way that you can see ratios written. The next one is trombones to trumpets. There are 16 trombones and 40 trumpets. I'm going to put that in the fraction-looking form, simplify it, and that would give me 2 to 5. Once again, I'm trying to show you the different ways of writing it. You can write it whichever way you would like. It's okay. My last one is violins to total instruments. So there are 24 violins, but we've got to do some calculating to get the total instruments. So I'm going to add 40 and 39 and 24 and 51 and 16 together. Once I do that, I would get 170. Now in order to find my simplified ratio, I would put 24 over 170 in my calculator, and I would get a ratio of 12 to 85. Okay, now we're going to go to extended ratios. Extended ratios are similar to regular ratios, except you are now comparing 3 or more quantities. And those are written as A to B to C. We can only really write them in this form. Because there's 3, it doesn't really work. You could also use the word form, kind of like we did up here, but you don't really see that. You mostly see it like this. So if I go through number 5, it says the ratio of two complementary angles is 3 to 7. Find the measure of both angles. Well, in order to do this, I've got to think back to what the word complementary means. If there are two angles together that are complementary, that means I am adding them and setting them equal to 90. So now I have an unknown. I don't know how I'm going to figure out 3 to 7 in a math problem. But I do know I'm going to add something. And I do know that it's going to equal 90. And I know I'm going to use the 3 and the 7 somehow. Now if I think back, when we use unknowns in math, that's generally when we use variables. So we're going to add the letter x with both of these. But now that I've done this, I've added the unknown, I can solve it. It's just a normal equation. I'm going to combine my like terms to get 10x, and then I'm going to divide by my coefficient, which would give me x to equal 9. However, this problem does not want me to find x. it asks for us to find the measure of both angles. So in order to do that, I'm going to plug or substitute 9 back in for each of my x values. And that's going to give me both of my angles. So my first one would be 3 times 9, which is 27 degrees. My second one is 6 times 9, which is 63 degrees. My next problem, number 6, says the ratio of the measures of the angles in a triangle is 4 to 7 to 9. So I know I'm going to do the same thing as number 5. 4x plus 7x plus 9x. But now, I've got to think what I add this and equal it to. It wants the measures of the angles in a triangle. All of the angles in a triangle add up to equal 180 degrees. So that means I'm going to set them equal to 180. I'm going to combine like terms just like I did in number 5. That would give me 20x equals 180. And then I'm going to divide by my coefficient again. So x would equal 9. Same as the one before, actually. Not on purpose. So now I'm going to plug it back in because I want to find the measures of each angle. So that is 4 times 9, 7 times 9, and 9 times 9. 4 times 9 is 36, 7 times 9 is 63, 9 times 9 is 81. And then I'm done with that part. So now we have to look at proportions. Proportions, they're not ratios, but they use ratios. So proportions are equations that state that two ratios are equal. A proportion is written like this. A over B is equal to C over D. Now if you look at this looks very familiar to something that you saw in middle school. And back then you did the butterfly method. Well, now in high school, the butterfly method got an all grown up name, and that is the cross product property. For the cross product property, I'm still doing the butterfly method, but I'm just cross multiplying. So I've got A times D is equal to B times C. So if I put that into practice, that means I'm going to cross multiply here. Oh. Let's see if I can get this right. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to cross multiply here. I've got 4 times 7 and 2 times x. 4 times 7 is 28. 2 times x is just 2x. Remember, you can write these either way. There is no right or wrong way. You can't get them backwards. As long as you were multiplying one as a cross, the order of the numbers up here does not matter. So now I'm going to solve this as a one-step equation. Divide both sides by the coefficient. And x is 14. Okay, looking at number 8. Number 8 makes it a little bit harder because there is something with this x. It is no longer by itself. So in order to do that, I am still going to cross multiply, same as before. And I'm going to start by writing the steps that I am doing. So I am multiplying 19 times x minus 1. Because there are no variables on the other diagonal part that I'm multiplying, the 6 times is 13, I am just going to write what 6 times 13 is, which is 78. So now I see an equation that has parentheses in it. When I have parentheses, I think distribute. So I am going to distribute the 19 through, which would give me 19x minus 19 is equal to 78. To solve this, I'm going to get everything away from the x. So I'm going to add 19 to both sides. Gives me 19x is equal to 97. To get x by itself, I'm going to divide by the coefficient. And that gives me x is equal to 5.1. You are allowed to have decimals here. It is okay. Okay, looking at number 9, I'm going to do the same steps as before. Cross, multiply. And then I'm going to cross multiply both sides. Because there is something with the x here, I'm going to write out the actual steps I'm doing. So I've got 90 is equal to 20 times 2x minus 9. I'm going to distribute again. That gives me 90 equals 40x minus 180. I'm going to add 180 to both sides. That gives me 270 is equal to 40x. To get x by itself, I'm going to divide by the coefficient. And that gives me x is equal to 6.75. Now, in your calculator, if you are not getting the fractions like I am, the decimals like I am, you are getting fractions, you're going to push Control Enter. In the Inspires, that will give you what you need, which is the decimal. Okay, so now number 10, the last one for this unit, or for this section. It is the hardest that you will see. It has distribution on both sides of the equal sign because there is something with the x on both of these sides. Remember, there is no right or wrong way to write this, but I am going to start with the x minus 21, just because that's my preference. So if I write it out, it looks something like this. I'm going to distribute like I did before. Remember, at the equal sign, you stop distributing, and then you start again if there's another set of parentheses. So the 18 stays on the left side and stops after you multiply it with the 20, or the negative 20, and the 3 stays on the right side. So this becomes 18x minus a big number, 360. And then my right side becomes 3x minus 33. Now to figure out my x, I'm going to move my variable to the left side and add my constant so I can get it to the right side. That would leave me with 15x equals 327. To find x, I'm going to divide by my coefficient. I'm out of space. And that gives me x is equal to 21.8. A little hint for the practice problems, just because you can see it. On this problem, on number 2 in your practice, it wants the ratio of wins to losses. It gives us what wins are, and it gives us the total games played in the regular season. So in order to find the losses, you would have to subtract and then find your ratio. Good luck. If you need help, ask your teacher.